Sometimes the strangest events in history have the most deeply human explanations. Today, we are diving into a story that honestly sounds like the setup to a joke, but it was anything but. And we're going to start somewhere you probably don't expect. We've all been there, right? You've seen a message just like this. You do something small, something simple, like click a link, and bam, you get hit with this massive, confusing response. You are stopped dead in your tracks. And your first thought is probably, wait, what just happened? That idea, a tiny, almost meaningless trigger setting off a huge, totally confusing reaction, that's the key to understanding one of the weirdest events of the 20th century. All right, so let's hop in the time machine and go back to 1962. We're in a country that was then called Tanganyika, which is now part of Tanzania, and we're going to look at an epidemic that tore through entire communities, not with a virus, but with laughter. So the first thing you have to wrap your head around is just how long this went on. This wasn't a flash in the pan. It lasted for a year and a half. It started small, in one school, got so bad the school had to close, and then it just spilled out into the villages, growing and growing for months. And this is that trigger we were talking about, the whole thing. It started with just 3 young girls at a boarding school in a little village called Kashasha. That's it. Not a patient zero, just 3 students. From that one tiny spark, the laughter spread like wildfire. Within just a few weeks, it had affected 95 out of the 159 students in that school. Think about that. That's nearly 2/3 of the entire student body. But it didn't stop there. The outbreak was so disruptive that as the school sent students home to their villages, the contagion went with them. It spread so far and so fast that a total of 14 different schools had to shut down. And the final tally? By the time this whole thing finally fizzled out, 18 long months later, around 1,000 people had been affected. 1,000 people, all from a giggle that started between 3 girls. It sounds completely impossible, but it just shows you the incredible power of social contagion. So it's really easy to hear this story and kind of chuckle, right? A laughter epidemic? It sounds like a quirky, funny little piece of history. But the reality for the people involved was actually much, much darker. This was not a fun experience. I mean, look at this. Yes, the main symptom was laughter, but it wasn't the happy kind. It was uncontrollable, and it was often mixed with crying. People also experienced restlessness, actual physical pain, fainting spells, trouble breathing, even rashes. This wasn't joy. This was a painful, exhausting ordeal, and it was all rooted in some serious anxiety and stress. Which leads us to the big question. If there was no virus, no bacteria, and it clearly wasn't just kids goofing off, what on earth was actually happening in Tanzania? Well, scientists have a name for this. It's a phenomenon called Mass Psychogenic Illness, or MPI. And it's a wild concept. It's basically when a whole group of people are under so much shared stress that their psychological distress starts to manifest as real physical symptoms. It's like their collective anxiety is literally making them sick with no infectious agent involved at all. Okay, so that's the what. But what about the why? What could possibly be stressing out a whole community of young students so much that it caused a physical outbreak? To get that, we have to look at what was going on in that part of the world at that exact time. It turns out there were these 2 massive forces at play, basically squeezing these kids from both sides. First, remember the year, 1962. Tanganyika had just won its independence the year before. That's amazing, but it also put incredible pressure on young people to be the future of this brand new nation. At the same time, you had this intense culture clash. At home, they had their traditional family beliefs, but at these Christian missionary schools, they were being taught a whole new set of often conflicting ideas. That kind of pressure, that cultural dissonance, it has to go somewhere. And here's where the story gets even more fascinating. The laughter epidemic? It wasn't a complete fluke. When you zoom out and look at the whole region at the time, you start to see it was actually part of a much bigger pattern. Just look at this. Right around the same time, in neighboring Uganda, there were these outbreaks of what they called running mania. People would just start running uncontrollably, showing similar signs of agitation and exhaustion. It really suggests that there was this shared, deep-seated anxiety bubbling under the surface across the region, and it was just manifesting in these different, bizarre physical ways. And really, this quote from the East African Medical Journal at the time just nails it. Dr. Benjamin Kagwa wrote that these kinds of emotional upheavals,
occur whenever a people's cultural roots and beliefs become suddenly shattered. The laughter wasn't the disease. The laughter was a symptom of a whole society trying to cope with incredibly rapid and stressful change.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. That small trigger starting off a huge, confusing reaction. It really makes you think, doesn't it? In our world of social media anxiety, constant pressure, and massive changes, what forms does our own mass psychogenic illness take? What does our collective stress actually look like today?